And we're back, and this week we have 3 comic picks for you, if I can get them in frame. We read House of X 2, Over the Garden Wall, and Absolute Carnage, which was absolutely long, but we're gonna chat about it. So without further ado, let's talk comics. Wait, what? And we're going to start with Over the Garden Wall. You may recognize this from the Cartoon Network show, which was both adorable and also spooky, and if that isn't my aesthetic, then I don't know what is. Now, Over the Garden Wall continues with Greg and Wirt's journey to different towns and spooky stuff. If you didn't see the cartoon, you might be a little confused. Well, Greg and Wirt are brothers, and they are traveling around and having adventures, but it seems like every adventure they stumble into is just a little on the creepy side. And this time, Greg and Wirt stumbled into this town where there appears to be nobody, until one person approaches them. That person, Sophie, and her 2 sisters run a theater in that town, and even though there's no one else there, they promise that the theater will be packed on opening night, and there just so happen to be 2 actors down. And who better to fill those actor spots than Greg and Wirt? Despite their bad singing and bad acting ability, something fishy is going on here. And the only person who seems to be in on it is Beatrice the Bird. I love Beatrice the Bird. I think Beatrice the Bird and I would get along. The theme of this issue is acting, and the idea is that everyone acts all the time. Isn't life just kind of acting? You dress in the clothes you want people to see you in, and you act the way you want to be perceived, and, well, it's kind of like putting on a play. Everyone's putting on their own little play. All the world's a stage, blah, 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 blah. It's fine. This was very cute. I really liked the cartoon, so I was excited to see a comic come out about it, and so I would definitely recommend picking it up if you enjoyed the cartoon, because it really followed that same spirit. I think a lot of the whimsy from the cartoon show was really captured in this comic, and I am very into that. And next we're going to talk about Absolute Carnage, and I haven't read a Carnage comic ever, perhaps? I really like Spider-Man, which I've talked about on this channel before, but I don't know, there's something about Carnage. He's a little edgier, he's a little more adult, you know? And the same with Venom. There's something about Eddie Brock, even though he's a journalist, and I love reading about fictional journalists, but I don't know. It just, something about it, I guess, seemed too hardcore for me. I was very about Peter Parker, the photographer, and also Spider-Man extraordinaire, you know. So I guess this stuff just didn't really appeal to me the same way that the Peter Parker stuff did. But I was really glad I picked this up. It is very long for a first issue of a comic, and in the back, they talk about how it took 6 months just to create this comic. That's a long time. So be sure to appreciate it while you read it, as you should with all comics. People work hard on them. But this was really interesting. My coworker was actually telling me that his favorite comic ever, and he's not a huge comics guy, was Maximum Carnage, which was a video game back in the day, and also like a set of comics where Carnage like breaks out of prison. And it was so funny because Absolute Carnage came out, and so we had, anyway, we're getting into the weeds here. What I want to say is this isn't about Carnage breaking out of prison. Instead, they're trying to set free the god of the symbiotes, who looks a lot like the Joker, if I'm being honest. But whatever, basically the god of the symbiotes created all symbiotes, and they want to release him so he can wreak havoc on the world, it seems like. So Carnage is going around and he's collecting what's called a codex. And that is something that's left in the DNA of people who are taken over by the symbiote. So you can assume that they're coming after Eddie Brock. But every time that Carnage gets one of these symbiotes, he becomes stronger and more godlike. And so obviously that's a problem. There are a few bloody fights, and this gets very, very creepy in the way that I expect a Carnage comic to get. But there's also some underlying sort of social issues, like human issues. Basically, Eddie's traveling around with the person he's calling his little brother. JK, it's actually his son. Also, Spider-Man's godson, Norman, is the grandson of the Norman that you know, which is the Goblin, who was infected by a Carnage symbiote, and he's now insane, and he's about to be let out of an insane asylum to do the wreaking of the havocing that I mentioned before. Things are just getting really weird. A lot of Carnage symbiotes are being released into the world while Eddie Brock and Peter Parker are band together to try and fight them, which harkens back a little bit to the Maximum Carnage kind of thing. I like that they're sort of buddying up right now. It's really interesting. So, you know, you're left with a lot of questions, like when will Eddie Brock, or will Eddie Brock, tell his son that, hey, we're not brothers, I'm your dad. And also, Carnage killed your mom while trying to get a codex out of her. They meet with the Maker, who is an alternative universe Reed Richards. Like, we needed more than one Reed Richards. He also wears this like weird Alien versus Predator thing on his head. It doesn't matter. And he created a machine that will allow them to extract the codexes from the people who have been infected by the symbiote that is now in Eddie Brock without killing them. which I think is the goal. So basically, it's a race between Carnage and Eddie Brock and Spider-Man to get these codexes, to save the people and also keep the world from ending super people powers. Cool. I liked this. It was long, but I really enjoyed it. For my first intimate run with Carnage, I was very into it. Oh, and you thought I was done with the X-Men stuff? No, I'm gonna review all of these comics because I'm really enjoying them, and so are a lot of people. So House of X #2 was a wild ride. It inspired this tweet from me. And not to be confused, I'm really into these comics, but that doesn't mean that they're not really confusing. Every time you read a new one, you're learning something new about, every time you read a new one, you learn something new about human and mutant history, and this one is all about Moira. That's right, Moira, Xavier's wife. Except Moira, in this history, she's a mutant, and her power is to reincarnate, which kind of seems like a crummy power if you ask me. Because it's not like she gets reincarnated into a new time period or she like becomes a flower if she wants. I think being a flower would be like a cool life. Sure, but if you have reincarnation as your power, like who cares? No, she gets reincarnated at the same time in the timeline. She just gets to make different decisions each time. And so this comic follows her. She makes different decisions throughout her life. The time that she realizes she's a mutant, the time that she marries Xavier, the time that she lives her life as a human, the time that she has a thing with Apocalypse? What? The time that she follows Magneto. And it all hinges on the fact that she quickly decides that being a mutant is something bad. It's a disease. She calls it a cancer. And so she spends a lot of her lifetimes trying to figure out how to eradicate that cancer. And we meet up with Mystique and a character called Destiny, which I appreciate because she's cool and also no stripper jokes to be found about that name, and I am so appreciative of that. It's inappropriate. Stop it. Anyway, Destiny can see the future. That's her mutant ability. And she tells Moira that she sees she only has a limited number of reincarnations, because if she dies as a child before her mutant powers manifest, then, well, she dies. And so Moira's trying to make the best of that, because in that timeline when she runs into Destiny and Mystique, they kill her because she has spent that whole lifetime trying to create something that gets rid of the X gene mutation. And she only wants to give it to people who want to be cured. And we've heard this storyline in the X-Men before. And of course, Mystique and Destiny both know that you can't just do that. You can't create something like that and expect it not to be weaponized by the humans to eradicate the mutants. So they say in her next life, she better try harder. And that's where we catch up with her in House of X, where she's meeting Professor X on that bench like she was in House of X1, and she is letting him read all of her mind memories over the past several lifetimes, where she's gone with Magneto, she's been with Apocalypse, she's also been married to Xavier and married to a human, and she's had a family and she's not had a family, and she has all these different lives. So she's going to be really pivotal as we move forward. And so it's so interesting to see this character who we have heard of Xavier's wife Moira before, but bringing her in as like such a major character is really new to me. Now, I haven't read every X-Men iteration ever because I'm 26 and it's been going on for a lot longer than that, and I got a job, I don't have that much time. Anyways, so I really like that this is sort of, she's gonna become like a main character, and she has this really invaluable information about what's going on, but also we know that in Powers of 10, we see a lot of future stuff, and nobody has mentioned anything about her in the future so far. So I don't know, like, how important are her powers gonna be, and how important is her information, and will she be able to harness that in any sort of significant way? Or is it just gonna play out like it's played before? Is she gonna turn on Xavier because she really thinks the X gene is like a cancer? Or, I don't know. She's had a lot of different ideologies because she's had a lot of time to just like think about it and do life over and over and over. And she's getting up into the higher numbers of her reincarnation, and Destiny said that she didn't have that many lives to live. So is she gonna reincarnate at some pivotal point and be killed? I don't know. I have questions. We'll have to wait, because next book that's coming out, of course, is Powers of 10, #2. So I'm gonna have to wait a whole 2 weeks to get into this storyline again. I love it, but I also hate it. I hate not having instant gratification because I'm a millennial and everything comes to my door in 2 days and I can just look things up on the internet, and Anyway, it's really good. I really enjoyed the House of X and Powers of X comics so far. I know not everybody's on board with these new X-Men comics, and I get that, but if you're looking for a new comic, I would suggest it. Just give it a try. And I really liked Absolute Carnage as my first read of Carnage comics, and Over the Garden Wall was everything adorable and spooky that I really wanted it to be. So I would definitely recommend these comics. I got them at my local comic book shop, Floating World Comics, located at 400 Northwest Cooch Street. I tell you guys all the time, not because I have to, but because I want you to know that Floating World Comics is a great comic shop. Everybody who works there is so nice and so knowledgeable, and they help me every week, and they can help you find a comic that you're not reading, but you should be. And that's all I have for you guys this week. We read Over the Garden Wall, Absolute Carnage, and House of X #2. So I'll see you guys next week, same-ish time, same place, and until then, this has been KGW's Comic Pick of the Week. This is the intern bullying me within an inch of my life. Teen bully, watch out.